Good morning again, Unitarian Universalists of San Mateo. As I said earlier, the last time I was here was in March 2015, when I was still a seminary student at Star King School for the Ministry. At that time, I think there was about 9 members of the San Mateo congregation, including Susan and a few other folks that traveled to the Unitarian Universalist Church of the Philippines. And so it's exciting to be back here today. I'm going to be at the Unitarian Universalist Church of the Philippines in a few weeks with a big family reunion that we have in Cebu. My family's from about an hour plane ride away from where your congregation is in the Philippines. And so I'm super excited to have family time and UU family time. So I've been looking forward to returning to your beloved community, and thank you to the invite from your minister, Reverend Dr. Tovis Page. It is good to be together this morning. It's important to be together as a faith community in times of grief, in times of rage, in times of sorrow. We must turn towards each other and not towards isolation. We come week after week to this sacred ground to remember that we are not alone in our grief. We are not alone in our sorrow. We come in times of trouble to lean into the values of our liberal religious faith. We hope that our faith is a beacon of hope, a guide in this stormy sea, to save us from meaninglessness, apathy, and paralyzing fear. For Unitarian Universalists, we do not have a single set of beliefs or creeds. Rather, we make promises. We covenant with one another of how we should be in relationship with one another. This past June last year, I had the honor of being a delegate at the National Gathering of Unitarian Universalists at the General Assembly in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, which had over 2,000 attendees from over 1,000 UU congregations. Along with electing the Unitarian Universalist Association's first queer woman of color president, Reverend Dr. Sofia Betancourt, she's amazing. One of the other most important votes that was held was the revision of our beloved 7 principles and sources. The preliminary approval of Article 2 passed last summer by an overwhelmingly, I think it was over 86% of delegates passed this proposal. And so the final version will be discussed, it's being discussed now, but the final version will be voted on at this year's June General Assembly, which is an all-online, all-virtual General Assembly. So everyone here and on Zoom, you can go. And so we are a living tradition, and you can still submit amendments to Article 2 up until February 1st, so in a couple weeks. And there's more information on the UUA Article 2 Study Commission. That's the name of the body that the UUA set up to propose the reorganizing of our values. So Article 2 is our covenant that binds us together as a faith community. And in its current form of our Unitarian Universalist values, love is at the center, right? So love is expressed through interdependence, love as equity, love as transformation, love as pluralism, love as generosity, and love as justice. So that is kind of the idea, of our principles. And some of you may be asking, why now, right? Why are we changing, these beloved 7 principles now? And according to the Commission, Unitarian Universalism is a living tradition, right? Our books say we're a living tradition. So what does that mean? That means that the needs of each generation must adapt our faith. And so it's been nearly 40 years. 1985 was the last time that we even looked at Article 2. It was the last time that we updated them as an association. And so that was 1985. It's now 2024. Also, the digital age, right, has shifted in those past since 1985. Where were we with technology, and where are we now? So between the digital age, our interactions with community have shifted. Our interactions with truth have shifted. The COVID-19 pandemic has highlighted our interdependence, where individualism falls short. That is one of the critiques of Unitarian Universalism is that we are all so hyper-individualized, everyone's doing their own thing, that we don't even have a common ground. And so the Article 2 is that common ground for us. There's also a rise in global autocracies, attacks on democratic institutions, climate catastrophes, mass extinctions that threaten the very web of life. And these are just a few of the major struggles that our living tradition must face today and in our future. Article 2 helps us be better equipped to make values-based decisions in facing these new and evolving realities. So when we add the ongoing genocide in Palestine to the list of global crises, it becomes clear that now, in 2024, is the time for our Unitarian Universalist movement to transform and become the anti-racist, anti-oppressive, multicultural, multi-religious, beloved community we know that our faith calls us to be. There's a saying in the Philippines from our national hero, Dr. Jose Rizal, who was instrumental in defeating 300 years of Spanish colonization as well as the ongoing American colonization. And he said this in the late 19th century. Ang hindi marunong lumingon sa pinanggalingan ay hindi makakarating sa paroroonan. Those who do not know how to look back at where they came from will never get to their destination. So we can't move forward until we understand where we came from. Since the times of Francis David, the 16th century Hungarian Unitarian theologian, we Unitarian Universalists have been practicing religious pluralism. Francis David is attributed to saying, we need not think alike to love alike. Francis David was so influential, he convinced the entire Hungarian royal court to enact the Edict of Torda in 1568, which included as the first in Europe the practicing of multiple religions as opposed to one dogmatic state religion. This is our theological heritage. Our cathedral of many windows draws from the wisdom of the world's traditions. We hear the words of 13th century Islamic Sufi poet this morning. We heard, come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving. Ours is no caravan of despair. Come, yet again come. That's from a Muslim Sufi poet. That's our part of the tradition that we claim. Rumi also says, all religions, all this singing, one song. The differences are just illusion and vanity. The sun's light looks a little different on this wall than it does on that wall, but it is still one light. Love, a love where everyone is worthy. A love where everyone is saved. A love where no one is outside the boundaries of God's love. No one. We know our universalism tells us that we are all saved or none of us will be. We know that our Unitarianism tells us that we are all worthy, every last one of us. Pluralism is indeed the heart of our Unitarian Universalist faith tradition. And in the book Turning Point, Essays on a New Unitarian Universalism, edited by Reverend Fred Muir, he explains that pluralism implies diversity, but pluralism doesn't just happen. It requires hard work through engagement. We have to be intentional to create pluralism. Pluralism isn't just a given. It's an achievement that we have to work at. South Asian Dr. Ibu Patel is the founder of the President of Interfaith America and delivered the 2013 Ware Lecture at the General Assembly of the Unitarian Universalist Association. He says pluralism is an achievement characterized by three elements: respect for identities, positive relationships between people and communities, and a commitment to the common good. Pluralism is not an automatic given, rather it's the result of a community working carefully, diligently, and strategically over a long period of time to foster collective liberation, justice, equality, and strength in the common ground. In his book, Ibu Patel talks about 3 questions when it comes to interfaith leadership. He says we have to ask these 3 questions of ourselves as people interested in interfaith justice. 1, who am I? 2, who are you? And 3, how do we relate to each other? When everybody is around you is the same, you don't have to ask these questions. But when you come into contact with people who are different, those 3 questions begin to play a loop in your mind. Muir elaborates on why pluralism is so essential to our liberal religious faith. Reverend Muir says, we are faith immigrants who have found each other and our home called Unitarian Universalism. But in sharing our aspirations and commitments, he asks, who have we left out? Who is not yet in the room? He asks us, who are the other faith immigrants who might want in, but don't yet feel welcome? Pluralism means learning how to make space for all of the immigrants who want to arrive at our shores, who yearn to be free. So, Unitarian Universalists, who are you? Who are we together? Where can we draw that circle wider? Are there some religious and spiritual expressions that we are more comfortable with than others? Whose songs, whose stories, and whose sacred texts do we easily and frequently turn to? Whose religious rituals and cultural traditions do we celebrate and uplift? What stories are still left out? Whose language do we not yet know? Whose name for God can we not yet hear? How do we serve the liberal religious needs of all the people who call San Mateo their home? We're here in the Bay Area, one of the most diverse regions of the world. How do we worship in a spiritual language that does not replicate the legacies of white supremacy and settler colonization? What does our collective liberation as Unitarian Universalists look like? Who are we bound to? The land acknowledgement we began this service with is rooted in the acknowledgement of settler colonization. In his book, The 100-Year War on Palestine, Rashid Khalidi says the modern history of Palestine can best be understood in these terms as a colonial war against the indigenous population by a variety of parties, to force them to relinquish their homeland to another people against their will. What does the inherent worth and dignity of every person mean for us, Unitarian Universalists, in times of active genocide? We rise in solidarity with the United Nations, who called Palestine the most clear-cut case for genocide. And we deplore the United States of America for being the single no vote on the Security Council blocking the ceasefire resolution. The single no vote in the United Nations blocking ceasefire. We stand in solidarity with our UUA president, Reverend Dr. Sofia Betancourt, demanding an immediate ceasefire, de-escalation, and restraint on all sides, calling for all parties to abide by the laws of war, including the Geneva Conventions and international law. We, Unitarian Universalists, have a strong legacy of justice. From helping Jewish refugees escape Nazi Europe, to Selma, Alabama, to stopping the Vietnam War, to fighting tooth and nail for LGBTQ equality. Let us now use our interfaith values and every ounce of privilege that we have and every resource to build the interfaith coalitions and demand our elected officials, our senators, our congressmen, and our president stop this war now. We've lost 22,000 lives in 90 days. 22,000 lives in 90 days. Each life had their own hope, their own dream for their children. Let our values and our covenants not just be words blown as dust into the wind, but instead let our faith be something real, something tangible, something worthy of the legacies that came before it. Worthy of the anti-racist, multi-religious future that can serve all the diverse people of the Bay Area. Is there a mosque down the street that you have not yet shared a meal with? Is there a synagogue that wants to raise a ceasefire banner with you? Does the local Palestinian youth movement need a place to meet? The next time your kids ask you about their faith, what will you tell them about their faith and how it matters in these times? Will you call your elected representatives demanding a ceasefire? Will you be there at the next action? What does it mean to stand on the side of love in times of active genocide? How can we expand the welcome table and widen the circle of concern? What does religious pluralism look like in action? We rise in solidarity with the Palestinian Youth Movement, the local Arab Resource Organizing Center, and Jewish Voice for Peace, who are organizing the West Coast National March for Gaza this Sunday, January 14th, 1 p.m., San Francisco Civic Center Plaza. The West Coast event is happening as the March on DC is happening. Buses from Chicago, from Boston, UUs across the nation are going to be in DC and in San Francisco. So we hope to see folks there. There's other UU churches organizing and are attending as well. In times like these, our faith tells us to lean into our UU values of love, interdependence, pluralism, justice, transformation, generosity, and equity. Our lives on occupied Ohlone land are deeply interconnected to both the catastrophe and the hope of millions of occupied Palestinians in Gaza. Until the legacies of violence, genocide, and settler colonization are ended with a permanent ceasefire, which is the bare minimum ask. Until the siege is lifted, until the occupation is ended, until Palestine is free, until everyone is able to sit under their own vine and fig tree with no one making them afraid. May we have a faith worthy of those that came before us. May we have a faith worthy for our children and our children's children, until peace is every breath, every nation, every faith, every child, every human being, every last one. No one left behind, no one forgotten. Amen. Blessed be. May it be so.